Okay, in this video I'm really going to talk about my favourite paddles and why they're my favourites, but I am going to digress slightly and show you a couple of alternatives that are liked by other people or that actually have an issue. So I'm going to start with the wooden ones at my end of the, the line. Some more wooden ones at the other, we'll get to those, but the ones at my end of the line. And we've got two basic shapes. We've got an ottertail paddle, which is long and thin, and that's great because as I paddle the pressure comes on the blade gradually, very little strain or stress. Great for deep water, great for nice strokes, and great if I want to be quiet observing wildlife. Then I have this one. Again, very traditional. This one is a beaver tail, so it starts thin and becomes wide down here at the end. This one is wood that's been laminated, but then in addition, because I'm using it on white water, there are sheets of very fine glass fibre, a couple sheets on each side, and a ribbon around the edges to strengthen it. They do take a beating, but we've got one at the end there that's been in use for maybe 3 years, and we'll go through that in detail. So, beaver tail, fairly heavy, and if I was doing the same sort of thing, is it a true beaver tail? The shape's modified slightly, but it's still wide down at this end rather than wide up here with the otter tail. This is great. This has a lot of grip on the water, but it's not as heavy as my white water blade, which has to be strong to take the knocks. The handle is more an Algonquin style, I believe people call it, and I like this because in strokes it's very easy for my hand to rotate on the handle here. If I go back to my beaver tail, then this is really for good grip in white water, so I need, it's almost a T grip there, but it's still shaped, bit of a compromise, but it gives me a good grip with the hand in white water. So I like all three of those, and those are the ones that I will use normally. So if I go back to the difference between the ottertail and the beaver tail, Maya's just pointed out that I called it long and thin, and she was muttering to herself, unlike you, Dad. Thank you very much, Maya.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. The thing with the ottertail is that it gradually goes into the water and puts power onto the blade. So there isn't much of a jar onto the muscles. And the people who paddled the Voyageur canoes going across Canada in the fur trade, their blades to an extent were similar to this. They would be more angled, but they were relatively small and long and thin. And the idea of that was to lessen the muscle strain. That was providing power for the 9, 10, 12 men that were doing that in those big canoes. The beaver tail, when you drop that into the water, immediately has got a lot of blade engaged, so it's really good for steering, which is why it's a good white water paddle if you can have a wooden one. You know, I've put a clip of surfing with it, and you'll see the moment I drop the paddle in, there's a lot of area engaged and it really grips the water, but it can be quite jarring. In the days of the Voyageur canoes, the bowman and the stern paddler would have one of these, generally. I'll include a photo, but because they were stood, the paddle's about up to where my hand is, if it's still in shot in the sight, in the thing. So those are the ones I will normally take with me. If I know I've got a rocky river, then I may take a plastic paddle as well. And I've put this amongst my favourites. This is an Ainsworth. The issue with having a metal shaft it doesn't quite have the bend in it. Having a slight amount of flex in a shaft takes some of the stress out when you first apply power to a blade. There is some, but it's not as much as I would like. But what I like about the Ainsworth, relatively cheap paddle, but it's a nice clean blade face. And that means if I'm slicing the blade forward for a silent stroke, slicing it out here for a draw stroke, there's nothing much to actually ruffle the water. And I've included amongst the paddles this one, which is a sort of cheap paddle I've been given for trips in Canada and the like. And the problem here is that it has a spine. And if you're using finesse with your paddle blade, slicing whatever, this creates a turbulence and you can feel the difference. It's not a nice smooth slice. So yeah, as a backup paddle, or if you're hiring from an outfitter in Canada, you may get something like this, in which case, yeah, you get on with it. It's about being there so much as anything else, but generally not a paddle I would recommend or use. Very stiff, big T-grip on the top. If you want that style of paddle, this is a Werner Nantahala. Far too big for me, belongs to a friend of mine who's very tall, and thank you for the loan. Bit of flex in there, so it takes the stress out. Composite blade, very small spine on it, so it doesn't make much difference in the water. And it's robust, I can see some wear and chips from rocks, but that is a good paddle. I wanted one of these for years, and they were very expensive, but I eventually moved to wooden paddles. No, I wouldn't have this now, but they're very, very popular among some very, very good paddlers. Great paddles, not for me. I've had this paddle a very long time. It is made for white water, even though it's a laminate, and people make a mistake on this because you can buy laminated paddles which are really nice, look nice, perform nicely. They're not designed for white water. And the problem with a laminate paddle like this, and the paddles I'm using are the same, is if you keep taking blows to the tip, then it can split along the laminate. This was designed for white water, so a bit like my whitewater beaver tail, then this has got a couple of layers of glass fibre sheeting over each face, which makes it really robust. It doesn't have an edging, it just had a piece, some glass over there, so that's roughed up over the years. Has this strengthening piece at the tip, so when you're bashing, again, you're not going to split that laminate. But this hasn't been used for years now. Probably had this 20, 25 years. It could do with some tender loving care. It's beginning to come apart there. Need a woodworker and a lot of love to get this back into action. But again, this square tip for white water to get in and immediately get hold of the water. What I'm going to chat through as well is the different grips, and this is a T-grip. They can be even more utilitarian, just basic tube across here for some competition paddlers. And people say they're great because they give you a better grip in white water. Yeah, I've never thought that to be a particular issue, but a lot of people think that. On easier water or learning strokes, it is a more difficult paddle because you have to release your grip and rotate around. And with a T-grip, people tend to keep the grip on, and that puts a massive amount of stress on the wrist. Releasing the hand to allow it to slide round means you've got the stroke, this would be a J stroke, and there's little stress there. This is a fairly traditional grip. The wear here, I think, is because it's been stored badly on a couple of journeys, so it's been bouncing up and down. Not that happy with that, but it could be sanded and oiled. The nice thing with this style grip is it's easier to rotate the hand on the paddle, so rather than just have it fixed like on a T-grip, you can rotate more easily. With this one, it's sort of a halfway house between the T-grip and the more traditional, but it allows you still in white water to get the thumb around it if you need to or you want to. And it's a really good compromise for white water. I don't like a straight T-grip, although I do use it on occasion, but this modified T works really well. Quite difficult to do because it has to have a wooden peg running through the centre of it to make sure this all stays together. I love the grip on this one. It's, some people call it an Algonquin grip. It's long, flat. One of the things that it does is it enables you to slide the hand about on the top really easily. That takes the stress out on Indian strokes and J strokes. It's one of the easiest paddles to learn a J stroke with because of this ability to move the top hand. And very often I will start a customer on this style of grip if they learn. Ooh, thunder in the background and the peacock, they're all starting at the same time. But there we go, we've got that. And you can of course go for a northwards grip and grip it like that. Probably a bit short is a paddle length on that, so my hand will be there and it can rotate round in various strokes. So when it comes to getting the right length of paddle, well, the whole series of variables. The height, the proportions of your body from the shoulder to the hip, to the amount of weight you've got in your boat, which may sink it an inch or two further into the water, centimetres into the water. I've had that on expedition. But a quick ready reckoner for me, and what I do with customers with this basic style paddle, is that if I put it against somebody and I have it about an inch, couple centimetres below the chin, that gives me the right length. But that works for that paddle. When it comes to something like this, the blade's obviously very long indeed, so that rule no longer works. So a slightly more accurate way of doing it, and we will have our own variation within that, whether we want a slightly shorter one, slightly longer one, suits the style of the person. If we kneel, and it's this leg that's the critical one, it should be pretty straight from the knee to the hip. Now if I take hold of the paddle by the throat where the blade begins to widen, and I hold it like that, well, people used to reckon that the arm should be level. I find that a little long for modern style paddling, so if there's a very slight slope there, downward slope, but slight, that gives me the right length of paddle. I can use exactly the same on this paddle, which has got a longer blade. If I take my hand up to the throat, that's actually going down a little bit steeper, but in white water I like a slightly shorter blade. I can be quicker on the power into steer, but again it comes to taste. That's very slight, and it still works. It still works with a very long paddle like this. There, that's going down a little bit steeply. Strictly speaking, that might be a little bit short for me, but I'm so used to it, I find it perfectly okay. So one of the reasons I like wooden paddles is the maintenance on them. And I always now get oiled paddles. I don't like varnish because I use the gunnel and that chips the varnish. And then that's a real mess to actually repair. With an oiled paddle, then I just every now and again add some oil to it. And maybe once every couple of years I'll take some very fine wire wool or sandpaper to it and just take the top surface off and re-oil it. So this one is dry. It's been in the store for a little while. I've had a quiet winter, and you can see it's beginning to dry out, which is not a good thing. So what I'm going to use is Danish oil. Quite an expensive oil, this one. Some people and some manufacturers will use boiled linseed oil, and if you use that, it's best to thin it down at least 50-50 so that it will soak into the wood better. Over the years I've come to prefer this. It's thinner, it seems to soak in better, so that's my choice and the choice of a lot of people. But again, a lot of people use boiled linseed oil. Don't boil it yourself, you buy it, boiled linseed oil. And let's get the cap off, which is always fun. Oh, this one's working. There we go. Oh, it's so new, it's even got the cap on it still. Here we go for a little glug. Oh. Let's put this down. This one was a present for my 70th birthday. Taken a nasty chip out of the side. I can't really do much other than just sand that. I can't actually do anything to that chip. Anybody's got wonderful suggestions, I'll listen to them. So here we go. Need some more oil. I think the cloth is quite happy to absorb it as well. While we're there, this one just has a little tip on it to try and guard the end of the wood. I really like this paddle. It's got a lovely feel when I'm in deep water. I do like very often to have a nice wide paddle. It gives me that grip. So here we go, let's go on up the shaft. And that's the maintenance done for a good few months now, which is one of the reasons I like that.
I don't want to do this.
So, what do you like about it, Maya?
It's got my name, unlike my dad's paddles, which you can never see. It's got all the scratches from all the stuff we've done and where I've hit him across the head.
And helpful. And what you can do is you can press like, you can subscribe, and comments are always welcome. If you'd like to support the channel, there is a link in the description below for buymeacoffee.com. My own book, Canoeing, is available directly from myself, but there are links in the description below for easy buys in North America or the rest of Europe. Thank you for watching.